container.
Molly, run! Run!
We are talking about the Netherlands-produced science fiction movie Kill Mode. This is directed by someone whose name I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce because it's just going to be a horror show if I did that. But suffice to say, it's directed by someone. And this is a kind of, although it's a movie from the Netherlands, it's actually spoken in English language. So the story here, we have a dystopian style future where the world has been ravaged by some type of virus or disease. Now, a few years after that, a company has stepped up and created a treatment for it, which ultimately halts the kind of the disease in its tracks. It doesn't cure it, but it ultimately stops it from killing anyone. But because of this, this company now is all-powerful and ultimately runs the world. And there is a group of resistance fighters, although they're called terrorists by the company, that actually believe the company initially was the one responsible for releasing the virus in the first place, and therefore, you know, have positioned themselves into this massively powerful entity by sacrificing the lives of millions. The actual plot of the movie focuses primarily on this group of resistance fighters breaking into a facility from the company to discover, well, they think they're going to find the cure, the actual cure that this company has developed, sort of buried secretly within there, but they actually discover it could be kind of something else and something that may have a far more personal connection to one of the members of the group. So let's discuss Kill Mode. What works, first of all? So I have to say the scope of this movie and the world building is pretty good. The technology here reminds me a lot of the kind of the movies like Elysium and District 9. It has that sort of science fiction feel, but a kind of a real world kind of style of applications. And we have these kind of, for example, these exosuits towards the end that look like they are, you know, still a ways away from being the kind of the slick design of things you'll see in like Iron Man and stuff like that. They are kind of chunky and clunky, but and not OTT powerful. So it makes them kind of like real world believable. The kind of the weapons that they use and stuff as well here, just little touches that do make it seem like science fiction, but aren't kind of like a million miles away from kind of what you'd expect technology to be in just a kind of a few short years. So I actually kind of quite liked this. There's kind of this kind of grungy kind of design here, and just kind of little touches like the kind of the various modes and the kind of the guns, hence the name kind of Kill Mode and stuff like this, that were just kind of like incorporated into the film. So the film does have a quite a kind of a neat. You know, a neat kind of attention to detail. The movie's also pretty action-packed. There's plenty of action here. In fact, I would say, and we'll come on to this again, but the last kind of 2/3 of this movie, the last 2 acts, are more or less one big action sequence. So there's plenty kind of going on screen. And although it's a relatively low-budget movie, I was impressed with some of the effects work in regards to some of the kind of the CGI and stuff like that. I mean, it does look a little bit on the cheap side, but I can't imagine this was a hugely budgeted movie. So what they've actually done with probably a relatively meagre amount of money was actually kind of quite impressive here. And like I said, you pretty much won't be bored in this movie because it's such a kind of kinetic and frantic pace. You're just going to be, going from one kind of set piece to the next, to the next, to the next. So that was all quite good. They also introduced an element kind of midway through the movie which may well change the dynamic. It almost adds a kind of superhero-esque kind of style, kind of feel to it. But again, I kind of like the restraint held of the actual kind of this concept. And, you know, it's as the movie progresses, there might be more power explored. But, you know, although it's obviously going further into sci-fi territory and sort of, fantasy territory, there still is some restraint with the filmmakers to make this, seem more grounded than maybe they could have done had they kind of let their imagination run away with them. So that I quite liked. So what didn't I like? Okay, so I would say there's two major things in this movie that I feel let it down. One is the acting. The acting here is terribly overacted by a lot of the cast. Not everyone, there are a couple of performances that I feel were a little bit more understated, but there's a good portion of the cast here horribly overacts. Now, I have a feeling this may well be partially because they're not speaking Dutch, they are speaking English. So they kind of tend to over-enunciate certain words and things like this. So the acting from some of the cast does seem very cheesy, but nonetheless, it is what it is. The acting does not seem good. But I also think things like the dialogue as well, there's some really kind of like hammy dialogue. And I wonder again if this is coming from a kind of a translatory point of view. Because yeah, the dialogue here is awfully trite and does not seem natural. It's very kind of like action movie kind of cliche sort of stuff here. Speaking of action movie cliche, the shaky cam. The shaky cam is unbearable with this movie. Now, shaky cam can be used to effect sometimes to give the kind of an action scenes a little bit more of a gritty, realistic effect, and we've seen it done kind of, you know, with good effect here on some movies. But this movie, oh my god, even a static shot of two people talking in a relatively kind of quiet scene, the camera will be kind of jumping up and down. It is so distracting. And forget about it when you're kind of watching some of these action sequences, because it looks like literally someone has just rolled a camera down the floor. It's so shaky you cannot see what is going on. And this is not a found footage movie. I mean, has this director never heard of a tripod? I mean, it's just way too much. Yeah, it's too much. And then I've kind of alluded it to before. There isn't actually a great deal of plot in this movie. When it's all said and done, the setup is relatively kind of, you know, relatively good, but the actual meat of the story, this kind of latter sort of 2/3, it's just one big action sequence. I was waiting for something else to happen, really. It's kind of like the next kind of part of the story, but it's ultimately a huge heist and kind of like getaway sequence that literally lasts the second and third act of the movie. And although that's, you know, it does make for some good action sequences, I'm thinking, is this all the movie's going to be? It's just going to be one long action sequence? And it is. So, does this sound like it would appeal to you? I have to ask you. For me, it was. There were some nice attention to details here, but I've got to say, there are some techniques here I feel let the movie down, and it just needed a little bit more to it. I don't necessarily think this is a bad movie at any point, but it's really kind of ultimately somewhat forgettable. So I'll give this one a 5 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I shall look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.